In this video, we are going to be replacing the transmission in Dodge Grand Caravan. These are very notorious for going out, so we're going to do a step-by-step video. If you find this video helpful, please like and subscribe. These videos do take some time to make, so it's greatly appreciated. So here we go, let's get tearing into it. First step, we're going to remove the battery. Just loosen the 10mm bolts that hold the battery cables on. Wiggle the battery cable ends off. Next step is to take the 13mm bolt that holds the battery hold down on. The next step, you're going to want to go around and pull off all the plastic zip tie clips that hold this wiring harness in. Just use a pick like this to go around and take those off. Now that we got those clips off, we're going to take a 13mm socket and remove the battery tray. So once you've taken the three 13mm nuts and bolts out, you can slide the tray to the side. Then you have to undo, there's a plastic clip. You can rotate this up, and then it releases that wiring harness out from underneath of it. Next step, we're going to take these trans cooler lines off. Just get a flathead screwdriver. Pry these caps off. This can be quite a pain, but once you get under them, you can just slide them up like so. And what you want to do is get a pick, grab the end of this sleek C-clamp. And once you get it loose like that, you can just hook it and pull it out like so. Once you have the C-clamp out, you kind of just shake the line and pull it out. I'm going to do the same thing with the one right next to it. Be right back. Next step, we're going to take the shift linkage out. Take this clip out with the screwdriver. Like so. The next step, we're gonna pry it off of the transmission here. Just take a screwdriver. It's just a rubber bushing holding it in like so. Then all you're gonna do is push these two tabs in. Using a screwdriver is probably gonna be helpful. push the one side in first, and push it the other way. They're a pain, but they do come out. Next, we'll unplug this plug on top. Just push the tab in and pull it up. Next step is unplugging this main harness on the front. Put a screwdriver and push down. Push that back like so. These always have a ton of dirt on them, so you kind of just have to work them slowly so you don't break them. Once you get it pushed all the way in, it comes right off. Next, we're going to take the bolts out for the transmission mount. These top two are 18mm bolts. Then down below there's a 16mm bolt that holds it onto the transmission. Once we lift the van up, there's bolts that go on the back side here that we'll be able to get from the bottom a lot easier. We want to get that mount bracket out of the way because when we go to slide the transmission out, it'll hit on the frame if we don't. So next, we're going to take this vacuum pump off. The bracket has two 13mm nuts holding it on. And that one was really tight. Now that you have the 13mm bolts out of the bracket, you're going to want to get a 15mm socket, which will take the stud and bolt out for the rest of this air pump bracket. It's also the bolts that hold the transmission. The transmission bell housing bolts. So make sure you have a decent size ratchet on it. You're going to break those two bolts. There's one in front and one in the back. Once you get those loose, that air pump will come out of the way. Once you get those two bolts out for the air pump, you can just kind of take it, put it really wherever works for you. You're taking this ground strap, this bracket for the wiring harness off with the 13mm bolts. Then behind that, these 15mm studs, bolts that go into the transmission bell housing, which are right there and right there. Next thing you want to do is take this 15mm bolt out of the bell housing. It's a tight fit down in here. And there's one last bolt for the bell housing, at least, well, there's one more also on top, but I'll show you that one in a sec. This one I got a 15mm wobbly and an extension. I'm just going to put a gun on that and take that one out. Sorry, some of these bolts are really hard to record and take out at the same time. Just due to all this wiring in the way. There's that bolt right there. The last bolt we have to take out is that 15mm bolt right there on top. Right there. Now that we have everything loose up here, or taken out, we're going to lift the car, take the tires off, then work on getting the axles out. So let's lift this baby up and get the tires off and see what we got to do to get the axles out. So now that we got the tire off, you use a 19mm socket to take the lug nuts off. You're going to take the axle spindle nut off, which is a 32mm. Then you're going to separate the knuckle from the upper strut. We're going to go from there. Next thing I'm going to do is go around with a flat blade screwdriver. Pry the ABS sensor grommets out of hold downs here. Next, we're going to take the bolts off for the strut to knuckle. Use a 13/16 wrench and a 21mm socket. Then what I like to do is leave the nuts backed out, but still on the bolt. Since these are grooved, you can't take a socket and spin the nut out, so you need to take a hammer and hit them out like so to release the splines. Then you can take an air gun, loosen them the rest of the way out. So these are the bolts. They're splined on this side, so that's why you got to hit them out. You don't want to spin them because then they strip and make more of a mess. Now that we've got both bolts out of the strut, wiggle that through. Now we can also work the axle free. Now that we have the axle free, you can do one of two things. If you do the tie rod in, then you should probably do it before you loosen the knuckle. But on this one, what I'm going to do is just take the brake caliper off, which will free up the brake line. And then this knuckle should spin enough to be able to get the axle out. The caliper is held on with 21mm bolts. Let that sit there and dangle for now. little bit of finagling, you can get the axle out. Now that we got the axle out of the spindle of the bearing, now we can take a pry bar, get underneath, and pry the axle out of the transmission. We got the axle out, we can unplug these two connectors. Push the tab in and pull them out. Now we're going to do the exact same steps on the driver's side. Once I get the knuckle and everything loose, I'll show you what we have to do to get the intermediate shaft out on the passenger side. So now that we separated the axle from the spindle here, now we're going to lift the vehicle up. And then there is two bolts that hold on the intermediate shaft bracket, which we need to take off, and then we can slide the axle out. So like I was saying, we need to take the two bolts out of that bracket that holds the bearing on. There's two 16mm bolts that I can see. It looks like there's three. There's one on top and two on the bottom. So I'm gonna pull those bolts and I'll be right back. So we get that intermediate shaft bracket out. I came through here with a 16mm wobbling extension that came all the way to the back here. And then what I did is I just took a ratchet with a socket and a little bit of an extension to get the two bottom ones that go in right there. Now that we have everything loose, we can just take a little hammer tap on the axle itself. This one's going to come apart in two pieces. It looks like the outer shaft, just because that's where I was hitting it with the hammer. Intermediate shaft has come loose. What I do is put a pry bar right there and tap on it. Just be careful not to ruin the bearing inside of there.